welcome. Special welcome if you're visiting with us today. July 4th weekend, summer is in full swing. It's good. I love summer. It really seems like in summertime creation is its most alive, right? Everything is green, even here in Colorado right now, and growing. It's like the grass in my backyard invites just kind of a barefoot romp. The temperatures are just encouraging you to get out on your back patio or deck for those summer barbecues. You're eager to get in your lawn, maybe tending your flowers, or maybe some of those early vegetables are beginning to ripe. And summer's just a time when you really have permission just to take a little bit more laid-back pace in life, and I love that. Honestly, summer's just a time to get outside a whole bunch more. And it's one of the reasons I moved to Colorado was to enjoy the outdoors. So guys, I ran across this news release. It was so shocking I had to read it twice. It didn't make the front page, so you may not have seen it, but I believe it should have. And here's the shocking statistic. The average person now spends 93% of their life indoors. Indoors. And I went and I fact-checked the data. There's several studies that have indicated this. The biggest one by the Environmental Protection Agency, interestingly enough. 93%. That's a staggering number. We should pause for a moment and let the tragedy of that sink in. That means if you live to be 100, you have spent 93 of those years in a little compartment, and only 7 outside in the dazzling and alive world. If you live to the more usual 75, you'll spend 69 and 3/4 of your years inside, and will only have 5 1/4 years spent outside. Astonishingly, these numbers include your childhood. I believe this is a catastrophe and perhaps the final nail in the coffin for much of what ails our souls these days. Nowadays, according to this report, we live near all of our lives in a fake world. Consider artificial lighting instead of the warmth of sunlight or the cool of moonlight or the darkness of night against yourself that you feel. Artificial climate rather than the wow beauty of real weather. Living in a world that's always 68 degrees or whatever temperature you set your indoor environment at. All the surfaces you touch are things like plastic, nylon, and faux leather instead of out in the meadow, the woods, and the streams. Fake fireplaces that you just flip a switch. Wax fruit sitting in a bowl on your table. The atmosphere most of us inhabit is now asphyxiating us with artificial smells. Hang with me here. This is a little dramatic, but you'll get the point. Mostly chemicals and air fresheners instead of cut grass, wood smoke, or salt air. Are any of you weeping yet? This is life, what I'm describing for people living in a science fiction novel. This is not the life we were designed or meant for. We live a bodily existence, physical existence with all the glories of senses and appetites and passions. That's the life God meant for us. We know it's through our senses that we learn really most of life's most important lessons. Even in spiritual acts of worship and prayer, we stand, we kneel, we engage with our body. It's like God put our soul, my soul, your soul, in this amazing body and then put us in a world perfectly designed for that experience of the natural world. Which is why the rescue of our soul takes place through the engagement, I believe, to some degree with the real world. And thus the quotes in your handout there, variously attributed to Winston Churchill or Ronald Reagan, pick whatever. The best thing for the inside of a man is the outside of a horse. The idea of that is when you encounter, an actual horse, not online, not through Instagram, not a little horse emoji on your smartphone, but a living, breathing, 1,000-pound animal, you're thrust into a dynamic encounter with the real. It calls things out of us, those animals or outdoor experiences. Not only fears and anger and patience, but intuition and presence and that no video game will ever emulate. It's one of the reasons I enjoy mountain biking along with some of the other guys here. Max is one of the guys we mountain bike with. I'm just always struck when I go out by the scenery, the ruggedness by creation. I get stirred and kind of activated because all my senses are in play. Anytime we go out with the guys mountain biking, I'm always filled with fear and some degree of anxiety and danger. Even our trip that we took to Moab, 18 of us went down. We just experienced rough weather the first part of our trip. It was cold, it was wet, it was snowy, it was dangerous. We were pushing our limits. We're like, will I finish here? Will I wreck? And if I do, will I get back up? Is my bike, am I going to have gear failure? Are we going to make it all the way to the end of the trail? Like, there's just a life, there's a dynamic encounter with the real that's just not fake. It's the outside world. And anytime we can have those types of experiences, it's good for the soul, which is the topic of the series we launched last week, Wisdom for Soul Care. As author John Ortberg has cautioned us regarding our souls, and this quote is in your handout. And by the way, if you're a member here, you got an email with a digital copy of this handout. You can look there, or there are other copies scattered about, hard copies. John says, in an age of materialism and consumerism that tries to buy its way to happiness, many souls are starved and unhealthy, unsatisfied by false promises of status and wealth. We neglected this eternal part of ourselves, our soul, focusing instead on the temporal concerns of the world and not without consequence. We dare not neglect the care of our soul, our inner world, for if we do, we will suffer grave consequences. The goal of this series is to both inspire us and equip us to take better care of our souls. And there are many dimensions of that we're going to be exploring over these 7 weeks. You know, my hope is whether or not you're yet a Christian or not, I hope you want to understand you, the inner you, the real you, the soul you better. And for those of us who are already Christians, and maybe you have been for many years, if you want to fan the fire of your soul back into more of a burning flame, I think these messages are really going to help. Hopefully you looked, I shared some recommendations last week, some book recommendations. They're on your handout this week as well. I highly encourage you to pick one, or a related one of your choosing, and just put that on your summer reading list. You know, when it comes to outdoors and nature, perhaps I got a head start compared to other folks. I grew up in rural dairy farming country in west central Pennsylvania, and I did everything outside. I had to, because my mom was like, out. Well, I figured it out, you know. I played in the yard, I farmed, I had a lot of chores, gardening, took care of the lawn. I had a tree house. I practically lived in the tree house for a number of years. I rode dirt bikes in farm fields. And I also grew up in the Boy Scout program. My dad had me involved in that, and I was outdoors for many of those merit badges, right? Hiking, camping, backpacking. Every summer did a high adventure base, camp out and trip. And just the outdoors for me, it just kind of got in my blood. And it's still there. You guys know that. I share about this from time to time. Even this upcoming weekend, Dawn and I are taking 3 other young married couples to the Continental Divide east of Vail Pass. We have one of the 10th Mountain Division huts rented, and we're going to hike and camp and stargaze. And I got a really cool stargazing gadget. I am so fired up about it. You'll see photos here in the future. But I'm taking pictures of deep sky objects like nebula and galaxies and globular clusters. I'm such a geek, but I love it. So anyway, for Dawn and I, outside is one of our happy places. It's one of the many, 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 many reasons I married her. In fact, our passion for all things outdoors is one of the main reasons we relocated to Colorado in 2006. Now, there were other reasons. You know, we had cousins out here. Dawn's family was in the Intermountain West. At the time, Chris and Kim Reed were here. And we told them, hey, we're looking for a ministry position. If something comes open in the Rocky Mountains, just let us know. But a key component of it was our love for the outdoors that got us here. And so, anyway, when Dawn and I, you guys know this, some of you do, when we had our first sabbatical last fall, it was no surprise to many that we designed our sabbatical filled with what? Nature and the outdoors. Because we knew that's what our souls needed. You may go, well, why did you go to New Zealand? If you're not familiar, we had been on the mission field in New Zealand for several years, 20 years ago, and we always desired to go back. It took us 20 years to do it, but we did it, and we went back for a couple months. And had a great time, kind of combination missionary journey, connecting with friends that were still part of the church and weren't part of the church, and serving the church in Auckland and the new church plant down in Christchurch. But we were on this journey in a sense because what the Bible knows, we're going to get in here to a minute, and what the early church fathers knew is what our souls needed on this sabbatical was to just kind of get out and minister to our souls through nature, and there to rest, and there to restore, and there to find God in ways that we hadn't been finding him up until that time. And we knew that, man, put me on a beach, on a mountain, on a volcanic peak, on a glacier, a fjord, an ocean, on a body of water or something. It's going to be amazing. And so for 2 months, we in a small camper van. Some of you know this. We drove 5,000 miles, 37 different sleep locations. We backpacked and hiked 200 miles. I mountain biked 175 miles. We kayaked. We said the word wow 9,346 times. We really, thanks to your generosity, to be able to go on that sabbatical, had a most excellent adventure for our souls. And so it got me to thinking about, in light of our topic of this series, what is it with the outdoors and my soul? What is it with the outdoors and connecting with nature that helps me connect with God in unique and special ways? What is it about nature that honestly is truly spiritual? I'm not talking about worshiping nymphs and little fairies and other New Age gods. That's not what I'm talking about. And then I wondered, what might folks who are not getting out into nature regularly be missing? So we're going to spend some time, the balance of our time today, answering those questions. And so hopefully some of you are outdoor enthusiasts and you're getting out, but my prayer is, especially for those who don't do that, that maybe you'll be inspired to get out a bit more. A few years ago, Dawn bought me, my wife, a gift. It was a T-shirt and this canvas. And on this canvas, it says the words you can't see, but on your handout, you can see those words. It's down in the bottom there. The words are, wander often, wonder always. And this is visible as I sit at my computer. It's hanging on the wall right at top of my computer screen so I can see this anytime I'm sitting down at my desk. Those 4 words, wonder often with an A, wonder always with an O. God is meant to be wondered at. Worthy of wonder he is, of awe, of admiration, of astonishment, of fascination, of amazement and marveling. And being in his creation, his handiwork, his creation, his masterclass is a fantastic way to do that. Away from the distractions and the bustle and the worry and the concerns and the politics and the partisanship and the problems that we typically swim in. Some of you may be familiar with Tim Keller, founder of Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City, uniquely gifted preacher, author of a number of New York Times bestsellers. You probably know, if you're familiar with him, that he passed away last year at the age of 72. But I stumbled across this quote from him related to this. It's in your handout. And this is an interesting quote. And this is what he says, what Tim says. He says, the way you know the difference between a Christian and a religious person, a person who really knows God and a person who is just a nominal kind of morality, the way you know the difference is wonder. Is their ability to wonder. I think Tim is on to something there with that sentiment. The way you know a difference between a Christian and a religious person, a person who really knows God, versus a person who just has kind of a nominal kind of religious morality, is wonder. Cultivating wonder. You know, for me, maybe some of you find this, I just find when I get outside, I'm a better person to be around. When we got our dog, our most recent dog, Yellow Lab, a little over 4 years old now, Blaze, we named him Blaze as in trailblazer, like get out on the trails, blaze some new trails, go some new places, find something. It's all about getting out. But part of that dog helps me to wonder for God. Wonder and wonder for God. But this isn't just a feeling. This isn't just something for me. It's not because I grew up in the outdoors and in nature and was exposed to that younger. It's not just my feeling or opinion. Consider this passage in Job in your handout, chapter 12, verse 7. But ask the animals and they will teach you. Or the birds in the sky and they will tell you. Or speak to the earth and it will teach you. Or let the fish in the sea inform you. Which of these does not know that the hand of the Lord has done this? In his hand is the life of every creature and the breath of all mankind. What is God telling Job to do in this passage? He's telling him, hey, go out and look at the animals. They have something to teach you. Go out and look up and see some birds in the sky. They have something to tell you you need to know. The earth and all that's in it will teach you something worth knowing, is what God says. The fish even will inform you of something that you don't yet know that will minister to your soul. Every time you go out, pay attention, ask, look, inquire. What does it tell you? All these things will tell you something about God, something about your life, something about the sovereignty of the divine. And it says, it's interesting, it says at the end there when he talks about breathing into all of mankind, I find when I do that, what's breathed into me is I get life breathed into my thoughts. It steadies my nerves. That's what gets breathed into me. What God breathes into me is relief for my anxieties, purification for my motives, an expansion of my confidence and trust in him. This is what I call the spirituality of the outdoors. Psalm 96 in your handout, verse 11, let the seas resound and all that is in it. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. Think of your last time out driving. Maybe it was in the mountains. Maybe this July 4th weekend, or maybe you were along the beach on a vacation recently, yesterday, today. What did you hear? What did you see? What did you notice? What did you admire? One of the places in New Zealand that we went to that was just quite miraculous was part of the coastline on the western shores that are famous for their black sand beaches. And on these western shores that basically are, it's the Tasman Sea and then Australia comes next, are one of the 10 great walks of New Zealand. And Don and I had a chance to hike and mountain bike on that same trail. And I just thought the entire time I was out for those several hours mountain biking right along the coastal line, I'm like, everything here in this moment, in these 2 hours, is resounding with life. The noise of the fierce and mighty and dangerous waves crashing and spewing spray and mist getting on me. The sun dancing on the rocks and among the trees. The palm trees of the subtropical climate swaying. The taste of the salt air getting in my mouth. The smell of the subtropical plant life. Drops of water landing on my skin and feeling. It was breathtaking. It was resounding. That's what the psalmist is saying. There's a resounding in nature. There's a jubilance in nature. The trees sing. Do you hear them? Do you take time to see and wonder at God's handiwork? It's been said that you can learn a lot about the artist or a creator by the things he creates and makes. Romans 1:20 speaks to this. Since the creation of the world, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood from what has been made. All these things we're describing, so that people are without excuse. It's like he's saying, man, use your senses, use your physical senses kind of as this conduit to divine things, to eternal things, to God himself. Romans 1:20 actually tells us that creation, those created, is a sufficient apologetic. An apologetic, a defense of, a proof for God. Meaning that God says nature is enough to convince you of God. You can't use the excuse, I didn't have a Bible, I didn't grow up in a Christian country. Why? Because you got nature. Wait, what? How does all that work? We could look at that some other time beyond the scope of what we're going to do today. But for our purposes today, what this means is I want us to now start thinking about this idea, that there are two gospels. Okay, this isn't heresy, hang with me, that there are two gospels. There's one that's written, that's your Bible. That's these passages we're reading. And the second one is nature, which is the natural world around us. St. Augustine of Hippo says it this way, and I didn't have room to print it in your handout. Some people, in order to discover God, read books. But there is a great book, the very appearance of created things. Look above you, look below you, note it, read it. God, whom you want to discover, never wrote that book with ink. Instead, he set before your eyes the things that he had made. Can you ask for a louder voice than that? Why, heaven and earth shout to you, God made me. Suffice it to say, there's power in looking around at creation, pondering that, meditating that, taking that all in. It gives us insights into God. It draws us closer to God. It builds faith as we see his invisible qualities. Jesus knew this himself. He was not unaware. The scriptures describe Jesus often retreating to the wilderness and getting out of the hubbub of the towns or the city of Jerusalem. Doing what? Practicing solitude, praying alone outside, ascending the mountains to connect with God and pray. In fact, in Jesus' short ministry here on planet Earth, those 3 years of actual ministry, it's estimated he walked over 900 miles. That's a lot of time outside. Think about the times he withdrew to the wilderness to pray alone, or with his disciples, or with others, or in the mountains. He appointed the 12 apostles outside on the mountains. Miraculous and special things happened outside. It's on a mountain that the transfiguration took place. It seems for Jesus, his favorite place to withdraw and pray out of all of them was on the Mount of Olives, where he often sat and prayed and cried. One of my best places for me to get out my emotions, like I shared last Sunday, is outside praying and get it all out. On this note of Jesus being out in nature so much, a brother and friend who lives in Alaska, had lived in Alaska for a few years, raised a question about why does Jesus spend so much time outdoors? Especially, why do you spend so much time in the Mount of Olives? When it was located just outside the walls of the city of Jerusalem. It was within easy walking distance of the temple. And so my friend, it's bothering me, this question, why go to the Mount of Olives and be outside in this rugged, little mountainous, dirty place, and not go to the temple, the religious place, when it's right there? You could easily be right there. In his answer, my friend's answer to the question, he believed part of the reason is God uses the wilderness and isolated places to reveal himself, God to reveal himself in special places, to prepare and work with us in special ways and unique ways. I think maybe you're onto something there. God doesn't always do his work in the church or in the temple, the building, right? Despite having the tabernacle or the tent of meeting, eventually the temple, God chose to reveal himself to disciples outdoors. He didn't have them build an office space and let's meet there. And so it got me to thinking, many encounters God had took place with biblical greats outside. Adam and Eve in a garden. Abram under the splendor of the stars. Moses called through a burning bush outside. Noah's deliverance through a profound display of natural phenomenon and a whole bunch of animals. Jacob being wrestled to the dirt ground. Elijah spoken to on the edge of a mountain and refreshed by ravens under a broom tree. Jonah swallowed by a big fish in the sea. Hagar fleeing into the wilderness, and on and on. Even God sent the entire nation of Israel into the wilderness for 40 years. On your handout, one kind of cool thing in this regard is the Hebrew word for wilderness. It's midbar, which I have the Hebrew written there if you happen to read Hebrew. I don't. But it means, as you would expect, wilderness or desert. But surprisingly, it's also the word for an organ of speech. In other words, the wilderness, there's a word play here, is God's mouthpiece. It's his organ of speech. God uses nature, as we already saw in the passages, to speak to us. Psalm 19 in your handout, verse 1, is a quintessential example of this. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There is no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. And so the question for us is, are we seeing? Are we listening? Are we sensing? Are we paying attention and feeling? Are we tuning our senses into God's frequencies in these ways? Personally, to me, God uses the wilderness to help me when I'm confused or I'm in conflict or I'm insecure or experiencing grief. And when I go out into the wilderness, and for me, the wilderness, it can just be an uninterrupted time in one of my neighborhood's green space. It can be when I'm hiking, when I'm rucking, when I'm snowshoeing. It doesn't matter. It's a game changer. And I get reminded and renewed and refreshed and kind of just, it comes to mind again how extravagant and powerful to me God really is. And my mind slows down when I go out. And my disturbed spirit calms down. And the God that I feel disconnected from reappears again, and I can connect with him more deeply again. So what's the point of all this? The point of all this is to do what's on your hand up there. Wander often. Get out and wander so that you can wonder always. It's summertime. I hope you have some other vacation time coming up this summer and fall, not just July 4th. You can use that to engage all your senses and work on your wonder of God. Think about that Tim Keller quote about wonder. But even as the July 4th weekend comes to a close and you kind of get back into the normal grind and the day-to-day life, I want to challenge you to be proactive and intentional to follow. We looked at scriptural injunctions and imperatives. They're not optional. God told Job, do these things. What? Ask the birds, ask the animals, look at the fish, look at the sky. Heavens declare the glory, skies proclaim his work. They pour forth speech, they declare knowledge if we would but only tune in to what God has going on. If we would only pause and slow down to hear and to learn and be transformed. I thought it might be helpful in closing here to share, not so much when I go on some extravagant adventure or when we have the opportunities to go on a longer vacation, get a longer break, but like just day to day, because most of our time is day to day. Like, what do I do? How do I kind of get out? How do I put some of this into play for me? And so I'll give you just a quick taste of what this looks like in a suburban, urban area. Where all I need to do to begin is just to get on a path, which is about 30 seconds from where I live, and immediately coyote, fox, deer, the occasional elk and moose, right? Boom, it's there. It's in this suburban location. It's so crazy. But here's how I use my five senses, kind of in the spirit of Psalm 34:8. Taste and see that the Lord is good. That's a sense. We can use all our senses, not just that one. But when I go out and I wander in my neighborhood to pray and reflect, here's what I do. Smell. Summer's an amazing time, spring, summer, to get out and smell. Here's some things I just thought about I smelled on my walks and being out just in my neighborhood over the last few weeks. Smelling the lilac bushes, Asiatic apple blossoms, oh my God, pitch pine, fresh rain. You know that smell of fresh rain when it's on like the macadam, petrichor? Look it up. There's a word for that. It's so cool. Cherry blossoms. The smell of ponderosa pine. You pull a little bark off. It smells like vanilla. Wow, it's so cool. I listen to the coyotes maybe after a kill, or I stop and listen to the prairie dogs barking and scurrying. The insects or the birds. I torment the birds sometimes. This is by way of confession. I have a bird app that identifies, you can take a picture of them or you can record the sound of them. But then you can play the sound of the bird back. And so, like, if I see a bird and I kind of identify it, I can play the song. And it's amazing to, like, psych out this bird when he hears a song That's like his sign. It's like, where's that coming from? And, and you can kind of woo them in, and they'll move in closer and closer to you. Okay, I do weird things. Okay. Touch. What about touch? Take note to the wind, the breeze, the temperature. If you're near a stream, the coolness of the stream, or maybe a mist from the waterfall. The warmth of the sun. Or maybe a little earlier this year, a snowflake on the tongue. I still catch snowflakes on my tongue at almost age 58. Why not? Taste. Mountain biking, you taste some dirt. Even on my walks in the neighborhood we're talking about here, dust, the wind stirs up some of the dust. I swallow on my walks the occasional bug. Good. It's not a bad thing. Eat some berries, wild berries, if you know the right ones to eat, of course. Look. There's an extravagant variety in nature. Dawn and I love to chase sunrises and sunsets. When's the last time you went out and just watched the clouds roll by? This morning. Good job. Living things. I have a plant identifier too. The guys who I mountain bike with who get bugs sometimes because I keep stopping. Wait, there's a plant, a wildflower. I don't know. Take a picture of what is it? What's the genus, species? Whoa, hey, that's cool. Okay, let's keep riding. I'm like, gosh, why do you keep stopping? I have hundreds and hundreds of wildflowers alone identified because I'm looking. And I like to look at night at the stars. One of the things we're going to do in this hot hike this weekend with my cool new little smart telescope gadget, it's called Electronically Assisted Astronomy, EAA, is literally like I'm taking pictures of nebula. It's crazy. And I just think, man, why do I like going out and watching the stars and looking at, well, first of all, God told Job, told Abraham, consider, look, whatever. Okay, there's spiritual injunctions to do that and benefits, right? But I find that when I go out, you can't do that fast. You have to slow down. It's the quiet of the night, the quiet of the night. Man, and just sitting in the quiet of the night. I was sitting on a playground, a few nights ago doing this, the playground next door to me, and I just felt the warmth of the concrete. And I'm just pondering. No cell phone, nothing turned on. I'm resolving different objects, aware of the grandeur of the universe. And my soul gets stilled. It's a profound feeling within 100 yards of my house. I don't have to go on vacation to get that. These and many other ways. I'm not saying you have to do it. This is just kind of what I do to try to tap into what we're talking, so I can marvel more and wonder more, because so much tries to pull me down. The events of life, the circumstances of life, Satan. And I need that time to remind me, no, God's powerful. God's got this. God is good when I may be doubting if he is. God's faithful when I'm wondering if he is. These are the benefits. And so I'll end with a story about John Muir. It's in your handout here. John Muir, he was the father of national parks, co-founder of the Sierra Club. John Muir hated the word when you got outdoors hiking, hated the word. So he encouraged the people to use sauntering instead. S-A-U-N-T-E-R-I-N-G, sauntering. Okay, now there's a history behind this, and it's on your handout here, because a long time ago in the Middle Ages, people used to make pilgrimages to the Holy Land. And when people asked them the adventure, where are you off to? They responded in your handout, alla santere, which means off to the Holy Land. So these pilgrims were later described as santereers, which later became those who saunter. We all have spaces in parks in our towns, cities, neighborhoods that I believe we ought to saunter a lot more in. There can be a reverence there, a ministering to your soul there, a wandering and a wondering that will draw you closer to God. So I encourage you, as best you can, wander and wonder as much as possible. Nathan Phillips' last quote on your handout there, item. If you're in a beautiful place where you can enjoy sunrise and sunset, then you are living like a Lord. If you wonder often and wonder always, you will not only live like a Lord, I guarantee you, you will walk more closely with the Lord as well. Amen? Amen. We often end with a little talk it over segment. Just pick one of those 3 questions, grab a few people right around you just to talk about what we just went through today so you can digest it, internalize it, and hopefully let God's word change you for the better. The other ones you can just use in your quiet times this week, but just pick one to reflect on with a few people near you, and then after that, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and hopefully let's all do some sauntering as we wonder and wonder this week.